Billy Dees right here having another bad hair day. Oh my, can you tell it's the 4th of July? It's the 4th of July, having a bad hair day right here with Billy Dees, and I'm doing a video for YouTube and Facebook about the podcast. Happy 4th of July. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. It's great out here this evening, and even with the fireworks going off in the distance, I figured, hey, this would be a great time to get out of the studio and do a video and an update about what's going on with the podcast. Podcast overall is doing very well. We're being picked up on more and more platforms, and we have a national, certainly an international audience. Most of the plays probably come from Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which is totally awesome. And in regard to this video, I just wanted to address a couple things. We've been late to Facebook and we came late to YouTube, and I'm going to talk about why that is, leading into some of the other things that have come up in the course of conversation with folks about the podcast, and one of them is live podcasts. And I understand why live podcasts are popular. For one, there's a certain energy that comes with live that is hard to duplicate pre-recorded. There's a certain vibe, a certain energy when you're live and you're listening to someone in real time and they're expressing themselves in real time, and there's always the risk when you're live that something is going to go wrong, and there's that energy and that heightened excitement of live, and I appreciate that. I do. But on the other hand, there's a certain amount of logistics that have nothing to do with what's happening technically during a live. But for live podcasts to succeed as live podcasts, if that's your goal, they have to be promoted in advance. You have to make sure that the audience knows where to find it. They have to know what time to find it. And here again, we're in multiple time zones. So that means, covering all of the time zones involved where the most of your audience is. And the other thing is, in the process of that, you have to figure out what is the best time to go live. When are most of your audience members going to be available? And that can be kind of tricky. The other thing on the other side of the coin is, if you're a podcast like us who have guests, when are they going to be available? They're not always available when the time to go live is up. And I've experienced a lot of hesitancy from guests about going live. So here's my issue with all of those problems. I'm very determined to make sure that the content, number one, is good, that we sound good, and all the promotion that we do sends people to a quality product in terms of content, in terms of sound. Those are my priorities. And when I get bogged down with all of the problems with going live, figuring out the best time, promoting it, getting guests to come on and all this, is that taking away from the podcast? Is it coming at an expense? Rather than enhancing the podcast, is it taking away from it? And I'm always very nervous about that. I do agree that live podcasts are worth doing. So we go live periodically. When we go live, we are on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we announce in advance that we will be live on Twitter at Billy Dees, and also on our Facebook page, Billy Dees Podcast. We announce it several days in advance. And new shows here, whether pre-recorded or live, the new episodes debut on Tuesday. So we have a new show every Tuesday, and if we do go live Monday night, that's going to be in the new week's time slot. That's generally how we do it. And I originally planned to do some more lives than what we have done, but what's thrown a wrench into that is COVID. And COVID has done that on two fronts. For one, very recently, I almost had a guest come in studio to do a podcast, And there were, well, should we wear a mask, and are we going to sit apart? And this whole thing came up, which is very understandable. So COVID has made the process of me doing things in person, whether I'm in my studio and I also have a mobile system to do podcasts, that has kind of put that way on the back burner. And the other thing that COVID has done is it's scattered the audience. Podcasts are very much things of habit. People catch them on a certain day, they catch them at lunchtime, they catch them on their drive to work or from work or what have you. And those schedule structures are not there right now. So I've kind of put live podcasting on the back burner, although we are still planning on doing them. And especially I've made some room where we're at for a secondary area to record podcasts and also to do video from them. And I'm hoping that becomes a lot more fun and a lot more easier once people can kind of get together and we have that ensemble energy. So that's kind of where live podcasts are at. They will still be done. I might do some special just for the purpose of going live. And of course, it's always available on demand. And that's the other thing too, in terms of the energy that you have to put into a live podcast. I've done live podcasts for myself and for other people for years on and off. And it seems like even with live podcasts, the majority of your listens come after the fact when the live podcast is available on demand. So you really have to ask yourself, is the amount of effort to get all that worked out going to be worth sacrificing the time that it takes you to produce your content? And that's kind of where I'm going with video. I do believe that YouTube is a viable resource for podcasting, especially when you consider that YouTube is the second largest search engine. So when people are searching for content that might be available on your podcast, they obviously can find you there when they're searching for whatever it is that you're talking about, new books or what have you, which is a big part of my content. So yes, it's worth doing. And I very much enjoy video. A lot of my time with my company and with the company that I work for is helping people tell their story with video. And I'm very excited about that. I really enjoy the creative process with other professionals. And I recently did one where the company that I work for aired one of the things I did on local cable TV. And I was a little nervous about that because broadcast standards are a little, the filter is a little tighter than what it is, on Facebook. But I got some good comments about it, and it for the most part, it was multi-camera, so there was a lot of things involved in that. And I was very happy that it came out and was received well by people who watched it at home on their TVs. But as a creator, not as a producer, but as a creator, okay, I am very much from the background of professional audio, okay? And I worked as a disc jockey for many years. And I worked as a stand-up comedian, and that's spoken word. I mean, you can go up there and read a joke, and it's not the same as performing it. That's where you have to put your feeling into it, and you have to perform your material, and that all is in your expression. And I've had the urge to, I've had people ask me about DJing again. I don't know about that, but I have had the urge to get back on stage and do stand-up again. But here again, COVID has really thrown a wrench into that as well. But my point is I enjoy the spoken word as a creator myself. So here again, when it comes to producing video to support the podcast on YouTube and Facebook, if my energy gets too involved in that, and I feel that the podcast, which has been in existence for years on platforms like iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and TuneIn and all these others, that standard has to remain. And I only have so much time. And although I really like video, producing it for myself and for other people, I only have so much time. And although the Billy Dees podcast is a vehicle for promotion for my own company, it still is something that I do mostly because I enjoy doing it. And I really have to concentrate the limited amount of time and energy that I have on making sure the podcast, the standard stays there, and that I don't get distracted by things I want to do on YouTube and Facebook to promote it. And that's one of the reasons which I alluded to at the beginning of this video. Why haven't I done more with YouTube and Facebook prior to this? And that is because I always put the emphasis on the program, the emphasis on the different platforms involved. And I have a really strong circle of podcast fans on Twitter. And Twitter has always kind of been my social media home. So I've kind of concentrated on that. But what has changed is podcasting now is kind of becoming a craze. And so many people now are getting on board with it. Both small startups are starting podcasts now, and large, big companies are getting on board now. So the competition for listeners is getting stronger. And I want to keep my base. It's very important that I don't start trying new things, and the people that have been there all along start hearing different things change in terms of quality or whatever. I don't want that. But by the same token, to grow, Facebook and YouTube are two areas that we're trying to do that in. We're also doing some other things. The promotions, I did a 2-minute promotional video for our last podcast with Mike Miller, and I promoted that, and that very good response. So these are all things that we're doing to diversify our reach, but I always want to make sure that that core of quality stays there. And the last thing that's come up is I talked about the DJ work, and I'm convinced that if I came up with a solution for world peace, and I was somewhere talking about it, people would come up to me and say, yeah, but you don't DJ anymore. And I'm really glad that I've left that lasting of an impact. But I was younger then, and I had an energy for night work. I had an energy for a lot of things, and I don't want to be the Brett Favre of DJs and go back and get knocked on my can. I did a lot of production radio work back in the 1990s. And I produced a lot of those things on what were called half tracks and half track reels. And half tracks sound good to this day. They're still in some radio stations, and audiophiles just love them. They were great sounding machines. I used to produce those in my old studio at Sound Perfection, and I would drive these things around. And I was very much involved in radio at that time. And of course, I was involved in clubs and restaurants who did a lot of advertising on radio, so it was a perfect fit for me. And those were mostly in fairly big markets. And back then, in the 1990s, and certainly in the 1980s, the late 1980s when I first started, radio was much bigger, a different beast than what it is today, okay? And I was in big markets with a lot of egos and a lot of negativity, I would say. And flash forward to 2020, would I get involved with radio again if I had an opportunity to get involved in a small market station and actually help them make what I'm trying to get at is music doesn't drive listeners anymore. Back when I first started, a big star came out with a new song, you listen to the radio to hear it there first, and those days are gone. Never going to return. People don't need to listen to the radio to hear music. Okay, as much as my friends that are still on radio insist that is the case, that's not really true. Any song that you want to hear is instantly available in the palm of your hand. So I do believe that radio is still very viable for background music, and that's not in any way a slant. Background music that provides news, information, personality. I believe there's a lot that radio can do, especially in cars and in morning drives and all these other things, but it has to change. And I have some ideas. I would really like to get involved with a small market station and explore these ideas and also integrate digital media. And that's something where I feel small market stations really, instead of going against what's happening online, join it, embrace it. And that just isn't happening. So if I had the opportunity to get involved with the station and do some things on those level on a small market station and build it up, that would be something that I would really enjoy doing. And I wouldn't get rich at it, but I would really enjoy doing it. But I can also tell you my experience with small market stations has not been good. Over the years, I've done some work technically for them and otherwise. And small market stations that have been small market stations for 30 years have been small market stations for 30 years for a reason. Okay. These are people that do not embrace change, and quite frankly, this is going to sound terrible, but quite frankly, a lot of them are just dumb as hell. And I would have to find the right fit, but I do believe that working in radio would be something that I would do again. And I still do. For those of you that may not know, I do a lot of voiceovers. There's been some programs that we have produced that have aired on radio, as well as I mentioned, local cable TV. And that's all great. I love doing that stuff. But as far as working live in a radio station, it would have to be the right fit, because big money doesn't come there anymore. And finding a station that's willing to embrace the times and go with the changing role of what we might call traditional media, to go with that role, I have found to be difficult. Now, if you know anybody that believes otherwise and they're in a position where they might be able to use somebody like me, by all means, pass them along. I believe it'd be a fun project, although you don't get involved in radio these days to get rich. I mean, that's just the way it is. A handful of big companies own most of the radio stations in the United States, and it's the way that it is. Like a wise man once said, it is what it is. So that's kind of the things that have come up lately, and I'm really glad that you're enjoying the videos. I'm really glad that you are enjoying some of the other things that we're doing in addition to the podcast. As long as they don't become a distraction to, I feel, what is the core of our quality and the core of our audience, they will continue to come. I have kicked around the idea of doing a podcast live on Facebook, like a lot of podcasters are doing, and YouTube as well at some point. That would be something that would be fun. Even if I didn't actually do the podcast itself live, if I did some of the production live on Facebook to give people a feel for behind the scenes, check out the studio, and here again, for me, it's about the guests, it's about that group, it's about the energy that you produce with other people. And once the COVID things, when a new normal, whatever that is going to be, comes around, maybe at that point, I will start doing that type of thing more aggressively. But it's going to happen. Probably within the next month or so, I am going to be doing some of that stuff. So anyway, I'm very much appreciate you checking out the YouTube channel. I very much appreciate you checking out the Billy Dees Facebook podcast page. And this is the 4th of July. New episode coming up this Tuesday. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.